cross-cutting groups. This was an important driver. We don't want, we use ICD for coding, but it's ridiculous if we use ICD for coding, but the ICD definitions are very different from our DSM definitions. If they are, then the codes that we're using are not real. They're not meaningful. We have to use those numbers because that's how we get paid. But they're really not, describing anything real. So this is something that we've spent a lot of effort on. And the basic driver here, the basic decision here has been, if there are minor differences, get rid of them. Work through them. If there are major conceptual disagreements or differences, then in that case, describe them very clearly. It's okay if in some important areas, ICD and DSM-5, ICD-11 and DSM-5 are very different. If they are, because of a conceptual difference, a major difference in the way the two systems think, let that be clearly stated up front. And it's an interesting coincidence that DSM-5 is going to come into vogue in May of 2013. At the same time, our use of ICD-10 codes for all our healthcare coding is going to be formalized in October of 2013. You say, what? Yeah, we've got ICD-10 in prevalence. We're not using ICD-10 codes right now. We're using ICD-9 codes. In October 2013, we'll begin using ICD-10 codes. But that's a time we'll be adopting DSM-5, and ICD-11 will be way along in terms of its process of development. And this is the relationship between ICD and DSM. Really, we love each other, but it's difficult to get along. The Director General for Mental Health, Substance Use Disorders at WHO is a very good friend of mine. He actually was 1 year senior to me in medical school, Shekhar Saxena. He's the one who's leading the ICD-11 effort. And although we are good friends, our discussions about differences between ICD and DSM are almost spouse-like discussions or disagreements, if you will. They are tense because the differences, classification does matter. And I want to share some of the examples from the conditions we'll be talking about. So let me, this is something that we've been working on in our lifespan developmental work group and our gender cross-cultural study group. Just wanted to kind of throw that out. But let's get to the changes that are recommended now. These are some of the changes that have been recommended. And I don't know how many of you saw the proposed revisions and the modifications of the proposed revisions earlier this year. I don't know how many of you participated in the commentary process for these revisions. The first proposed revisions were posted in February of this year, and then there was a long period of public comment, which was initially supposed to be 30 days, but was extended to a couple of months. And then revisions were made based on those changes were made based on those comments, and the revised version was posted in May of this year, and field trials have begun sometime in July. But these are the changes that have been proposed. A, make revisions to the criteria. Some disorders have been proposed for deletion. Some new ones have been proposed for addition, or the criteria change. And then in addition to that, how can we measure the severity of different disorders? Contrary to what some people have suggested, that the process has been closed, people have not been involved, or know about what's going on. This has been a very, very, very transparent process. There have been literally about 200 publications that have resulted from, with regards to this process. I've been part of 6 different publications that have described why we're proposing certain changes, why we're not proposing certain changes, things of that sort. It really defined our thinking about the revision process. And the comments, the public comments were taken very seriously. And for those of you who are familiar with the process, you'd know that actually for each comment, there was a response from the work group with regards to how that comment had been considered and incorporated or not incorporated into any changes that were proposed by the work group. So these are some of the major changes, and I'm really going to focus on the disorders of greatest interest to us. So let's start with neurodevelopmental disorders. Don't call mental retardation. Call it intellectual disability. And this was principally driven by the consumer groups, the families. Basically said, mental retardation is pejorative. It's not a proper term to be used, and so call it intellectual disability. And secondly, in terms of neurodevelopmental disorders, a major suggestion was, proposed change is that don't separate Asperger's from childhood disintegrative disorder, from PDD, NOS. Combine all of them, and autism, combine all of them into an autism spectrum disorder. Called mental retardation in DSM-4, suggestion, call it intellectual disability, and diagnose it based on the presence of developmental deficits of more than 2 standard deviations on an individualized, standardized, culturally appropriate test. And coding will no longer be based on IQ level. So it's not as though you've got IQ of 56 and you've got mild mental retardation, and you've got an IQ of 54 and you have moderate mental retardation. Eliminate that system. That's the proposal. And delete this category of borderline intellectual functioning, the 70 to 80 IQ, 79 IQ, you diagnose as borderline intellectual functioning. Suggestion was delete that particular category. Learning disorders, basically the NOS category in disorder of written expression, get rid of that and subsume that into a learning disability disorder, called reading disorder dyslexia, called mathematics disorder dyscalculia, just to be more precise in terms of what you're referring to. These are proposed revisions. In terms of autism spectrum disorder, no longer PDD, it would be called, subsumed under autism spectrum disorder, and would include autism, Asperger disorder, PDD not otherwise specified, and eliminate Rett disorder, because the classification is not etiological. This would be subsumed under autism spectrum disorder. Eliminate childhood disintegrative disorder. Let's take a look at some of these disorders in terms of this F90 to 99. Disorders usually first diagnosed in infancy, childhood, or adolescence. Suggestion to eliminate or subsume elsewhere some of these eating disorders, pica, etc. Include that under eating disorder rather than call it a separate disorder in childhood. Separation anxiety disorder under anxiety disorders, and Rett's eliminate. Addition of preschool PTSD. This is a new category that's proposed. Temper dysregulation disorder with dysphoria. We'll talk a little bit about the rationale, reason for that. And it's controversial, but the reason for that. Add a new category of non-suicidal self-injury, because that's a significant problem that's not been effectively addressed. And this new category of learning disability that subsumes a number. And the things that are no changes are proposed in ADHD, in conduct disorder,